Hello S3, thought we should start with a brief introduction to what you're going to be studying in National 5 history by looking at basically what the course involves and the kind of things that you'll be doing in the exam. So the first unit that we'll look at is the Atlantic slave trade from 1780 to 1807, and that involves four parts. And the first part is the triangular trade, which basically looks at how the triangular trade was organised in a journey from Britain to Africa to the Caribbean. It looks at the effects that it had on Britain, the benefits that it brought in terms of jobs and resources and various things, the effects that it had on Africa, which were obviously almost entirely negative in terms of slavery and the problems that that caused, and the journey called the Middle Passage, which is the journey from Africa to the Caribbean. Second unit we look at is Britain and the Caribbean. So we look at why sugar was so important to the economy of the Caribbean. We look at the influence that Britain had, the way that Britain was able to control the Caribbean. We look at how the slave trade and the resources that it produced were able to massively benefit the British economy. And we look at the mostly negative effects that the slave trade had on the Caribbean economy. Then the third part looks at the effect of slavery on the slaves themselves. So we look at what it was actually like to be a slave. So we look at the living and working conditions on a slave plantation, what you actually had to do, how the slaves lived, what they ate, where they lived, what kind of work they were involved in. Then we look at the ways that they tried to fight back, things that they did to try and fight back against their owners or to try and undermine the power of their owners. And we look at the punishments that they were subjected to when they were caught or when their attempts failed. And finally, we look at the abolitionist campaigns. Now, abolitionists were a group of people who fought against slavery and tried to get it banned. And so we look at how this abolition movement started. We look at who the key people involved were. We look at the different methods they used, such as kind of petitions, boycotts, and things that are very familiar to us today. Finally, we look at some of the reasons why it took so long for slavery to be eventually abolished. So that is the course that we're going to look at, the Atlantic slave trade and the effect that it had on various different places in the world and the continuing effect that it still has on the British economy and African economies and the Caribbean economy. While we're doing this, we also have to learn what we're going to do in the exam. And the history exam is made up of 6 different question types. So there are 3 source question types and 3 knowledge question types. The 3 source questions are a how fully question, evaluate the usefulness question, and a compare question. And the knowledge questions are describe questions, explain questions, and the 9-mark essay. Now this might seem slightly overwhelming and quite complicated, but don't worry, we will go through all of this in great depth over the next 2 years. We will practice it extensively, and by the time that you are ready for the exam, you will know exactly what to do. Your knowledge will be perfect, your skills will be perfect, and you will be as prepared as is possible to be. If you have any questions about anything that I've said so far, just ask. You can either send me a message, you can add it as a comment underneath, or whatever you wish.